What's up, folks? Anthony Armstrong here, former NFL receiver and host of Believe in Commanders. And with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league specifically created for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Make your way over to prizepicks.com/believe and use the code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for a first deposit match up to $100. You must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details. Pick more or pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu and Stefan. He's Stefan Bienkowski. Stefan, how's it going?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you? I feel, actually, I don't feel, I know that you're once again globetrotting, aren't you?
Yeah, I am globetrotting. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Not a place that you would think has anything to do with the Bundesliga, but wait. Kaiserslautern are in town. And we'll get to that in a moment, because while I was here, I was actually able to talk to Terrence Boyd, the former US men's national team striker and current Kaiserslautern striker, right? Had a fantastic season with Kaiserslautern in the second Bundesliga, and they're now here to play a friendly. So I kind of double tasked this by there's going to be a feature on Louisville City coming up on Transfermarkt, and of course we're going to have a bunch of content on Gegenpressing on Kaiserslautern as well. So on top of this podcast. But Stefan, I had Terrence Boyd for 15 minutes, so I think the plan for us was to do that as part of this bonus show. Also, this bonus show was planned to be the head coach of the year, because I've been traveling and you've been busy with market value updates, also with Transfermarkt, both of us, right? We've decided to do that next week, and on this show talk about the German national team, and then, of course, have the Terrence Boyd interview as well as part of this podcast.
Yes, and that's also partly down to Mark C., who's the only person who commented on my newsletter this week to simply say, forget about Julian Brandt, we need to talk about Germany. So, Mark, if you're listening, we're taking your advice. And yeah, before we get into that, though, I think it's probably worth poking some fun at me, because when we got on the call just before we started recording, I thought you were in a completely different part of the country. I feel like my dreadful knowledge of the continental United States geography seems to be a theme on this show. And another example of that is me thinking you were in St. Louis, because with no offense to the great state of Kentucky, I didn't even know there was a Louisville. And yeah, so I thought you were in Missouri, which I think is where St. Louis is. I hope it is.
Yes.
Yes. Only to find out that you're in a completely different part of the country. So there we go.
Well, it's not that far by American standards. I think there's some weird sports rivalry going on between St. Louis and Louisville. And I think there's also a historical connection, which I'm not going to say what it is, because I would have to make it up, because I'm not sure what it actually is. I think they're both named after Louis the 14th. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it makes sense if they were French before the English bought them. And what was the thing called? I can't remember. I'm sure American listeners will be shouting it out through their cars.
Yeah, you know what? Let's be careful here, because we're gonna make up some shit that we have to all pay a heavy price for in the comments.
The Louisiana Purchase. I knew it was something like that. Yeah, the Louisiana Purchase. That's what it was. Is when. The acquisition of territory of Louisiana by the United States from the French First Republic in 1803. Today, which includes Arkansas, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Minnesota, Louisiana, blah, 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 blah. So yeah,
and so on and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yes. That does make sense. Yes,
it's French, a very old city for American standards, founded in 1789, I believe. It's actually really nice, Stefan.
It's actually, it's going to sound like such a Scottish thing, but that's actually still younger than my parents' house, which is...
Oh, dear. Yeah, that is funny.
It just shows the difference in the old world and the new world.
But there's a good chance that some of the scotch you've been drinking, the barrels have come from here.
No, there's not. How dare you? Scotch is from Scotland. That is sacrosanct. You cannot say
Don't
that.
they use bourbon barrels for some of the scotch?
They do. You're absolutely right, actually. I was about to jump down your throat there because some people think Scotch is just whiskey rather than from Scotland. But you're absolutely spot on. I apologise. They use whiskey barrels. They also use not rum. What's
brandy?
Brandy. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's one of the big difference between Scotch and bourbon is that bourbon is virgin barrels, right? Oak barrels, and then Scotch oftentimes uses barrels that have been used for something else previously. That's my whiskey knowledge coming through, and this Louisville being the home of bourbon, there's a good chance that some of the Scotch you had, the barrels actually have come from here first, which is kind of cool. So there you go. There's your Scottish connection.
Lovely. Should we move on from American and Scottish history to the here and now? As much as Hansi Flick would probably rather we did talk about whiskey for the next 30 minutes.
He made me drink a whiskey after the game yesterday. Or 2 or 3. There was bourbon involved yesterday. I was pretty mad. There might be a good chance for a rant at some point during this podcast, Stefan, because it's been abysmal. I get it that it's just been friendlies, right? I think of these 3 games, the 3-3 draw against Ukraine is probably the most excusable because that was the Benefitspiel. It's a thousands game. It's a game against a country that's currently being violated by its bigger neighbor. I could sort of overlook that result, if you know what I mean, like as a singularity. If it was just that, I'd be like, okay, well, whatever, it happens. But then came Poland, where they actually didn't play terribly, but it still wasn't enough. And then yesterday was just shocking. And I know they're all friendlies. I know it's all preparation for Euro 2024. But it's not just the results, it's also the manner of results. And I do think that this pool of talent is far better than the results that it's showing. And, we can poke holes at this Germany team, no problem. Absolutely no problem. And, if you put them up against another level or team that is their same level, we can say, well, this is a weakness, that is a weakness, etc. But they were playing, by all due respect, Ukraine, Poland, and Colombia, right? Those are teams that they should be able to beat. And it is also the way they're playing, Stefan, that really concerns me. And I'm not sure that Flick still reaches that team.
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on here that really muddle up how much we can decipher from this at this moment in time, because, on the one hand, we have Germany in this really unfortunate situation where they're hosting the competition and as such, they simply can't play any competitive games really in the lead up. I mean, I guess they can have some sort of Nations League games, I think, if I'm not mistaken, between now and the tournament, obviously. Actually, I suppose they don't, actually.
No.
I don't think anything's scheduled yet, no. And look, we've seen host nations go through this quite a lot. Brazil come to mind in the lead up to their World Cup where, they were struggling to kind of pull things together because they just can't really gauge how good they are when they're not playing competitive matches. And on top of that, this run of fixtures was just a dreadful example of that. Obviously, I mean, you're absolutely right with the Ukraine game, actually. I think Scotland, I went to watch Scotland play Ukraine, actually, and it's a similar sort of thing whereby, after the war started, and it was a similar sort of thing in the sense that you kind of can't really take it, obviously, as a serious result or a serious game. And there's obviously so much more going on besides the football. I think we could even really push the Poland game into that as well, if you consider the fact that it was basically a glorified testimonial for Jakub Blaszczykowski, who came off after 15 minutes. The entire match stopped. He gets a guard of honour. And there's even like DJ sets and, stages behind the goals and stuff like that. So by no means like a competitive environment. And then, as you said, the Colombia game, which I think probably did a really good job of just kind of underlining how kind of off the pace this Germany team are. Yeah. And the issue as well is even if they did have competitive games, even if they did have, maybe their tactics all spot on and the players were all, facing the same direction or whatever it is, then we're still at the very end of a season where so many of these players will be absolutely exhausted. And it just feels to me like the worst time to try and pull together a national team. But having said all that, there are clearly big issues with this Germany team. And I just can't really look beyond the kind of crop of players that Hansi Flick has to play with here. And I'm just not entirely sure how much we should be expecting from them, because I kind of feel like when it comes to international football, every team, regardless of whether like minnows who are punched above their weight and turn into these kind of underdogs at tournaments, or even if we're talking about the biggest nations in the world, the Brazils, the Frances, the Italys, the Englands, whatever of this world, they always have to be better than the sum of their parts. Everyone has to be playing well. Everyone has to be fitting into that system. Everyone just kind of has to be on the same page. Even teams who have tremendous individual talent, like France with Mbappe or Argentina with Lionel Messi, they still have to fit into a system. Now, maybe that system is catered to them and gets the best out of them, but it's still a system that works in a certain way. And it just feels to me like Flick hasn't really found a system yet for these players. But I also feel like that might be even more difficult to do because, I just kind of look at those last 3 games and every single lineup is just peppered with players who are either past it, completely out of form, coming off the back of really disappointing seasons, or, just simply aren't good enough. You look at the team against Ukraine, for example, right? Got Schlotterbeck in defence, David Raum at left wing back right in front of him. Goretzka had a poor season. Sané off hot and cold. Marius Wolf at right wing back. Who would have thought he'd be leading the line for Germany? I know he's had a decent game season for Dortmund, but it's still a lot of ifs and buts. You then go to the Poland game, where I actually thought Germany's best player was perhaps Kai Havertz, who at times seemed like the only player who actually knew what he was doing or was able to kind of pull off what he was trying to do. But you've got him up front, you're kind of hoping for the best, even though he's only scored a handful of goals this season. Someone like Benjamin Henrichs is having to fill in at left wing back. Kimmich and Can in the middle of the park. Kimmich has obviously came up with a lot of criticism as well. And then you go to that Colombia game as well, the lineup where you've got Marius Wolf and Gozens as the fullbacks, who are both suspect at best, in my opinion, defensively. Again, Goretzka slotted in there in central midfield, who's had a terrible season. Leroy Sané there, Kai Havertz again. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that, for Germany to play well and for the entire team to play well, Hansi Flick is basically in every single match here hoping that 5 or 6 players uncharacteristically play out their skin. He's expecting things with so many of these players that they just haven't shown either this season or ever for Germany. And it just feels to me like too many ifs and buts when you can. And I do genuinely wonder if the issue that Germany are just dealing with here is they just don't really have the strength and depth that they used to have back in the day. Maybe as a player's injury, and I think what maybe even teased this all up is the reports that he wants to bring Thomas Müller and Manuel Neuer back. And I mean, with all due respect to both of them, they're both tremendous players in their day, and I'm sure they're still very useful for Bayern. Whether Manuel Neuer should be playing for Bayern next season, whether Thomas Müller should be playing for Bayern next season, an entirely different podcast. But it feels to me like there's too many. Flick is having to paper over too many cracks in the team, if that makes sense.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.